OC.
Hey guys, we're
Hi.
back.
Madam Maddox and Yaz, hear me out. And today we are making a video about alter egos. Obviously, it's a personal subject at a point, but also, discussing the difference between alter ego and perhaps maybe a personality disorder.
Right. I think a lot of people have alter egos, don't always admit to it, but most of us have one or two different versions of ourselves. Some of us kind of use those different versions in professional atmospheres, so we turn on one part of ourselves and turn off another part of ourselves in our careers, in our lives, those kinds of things. So I think that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to agree, as I sit in front of you as Madam Maddox, clearly that is a alter ego that I have chosen for myself. I would say that she has always existed within me.
Absolutely.
And it's like my Superman to Bruce Wayne, in the sense that I would say my persona as who I am in my day-to-day is a very soft, a little bit vulnerable, shyer person.
Right.
That person made it a little too easy for people to
take advantage of her?
Yeah. So I feel that Madam Maddox became my shield and allowed me to protect the thing that was most beautiful and necessary for me to continue to survive in the world. It's not a bad thing to be vulnerable, and it certainly isn't a bad thing to be soft and loving.
Absolutely not. However,
who do you extend that energy to?
Right.
And I had to learn the hard way. So
how to protect yourself.
Yeah. And so I think that Madam Maddox has become the front and center.
Ego.
Yes, for sure.
Personality.
Absolutely.
But not to be confused with multiple personality disorder or borderline personality disorder or dissociative personality disorder, which are all psychological terms that do exist. Completely different. We're just talking about different versions of our person that aren't part of neuropathy or psychosis or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that we were kind of like discussing before we got in front of the camera was when I first revealed myself to the public, there was a lot of terms being thrown around that would suggest that I had a mental some sort of psychological disorder. And I think that the thing that people need to understand is that an alter ego is something that you are hyper aware of.
Right, you're owning it.
You own it. You understand that this version, it's an extension of who you already are, and it is just an extension of the person that you already are. But it's typically, it's a projection of the thing that you need most.
Right.
So one of the examples that I was giving Yaz is one of the things that I do is I actually help people with their alter egos. And one of the ways that I do that is sometimes I get people on, FetLife is where if you have a kink or a fetish, you can go there and safely kind of expose yourself there. And oftentimes you get submissives or people who want to play a certain role in their life.
Right, that may have to keep that concealed from other people in their lives.
Right, maybe they have a career that revolves around like being in control and having to play the boss mode.
Right.
And they may have a fetish of, excuse the dog, they may have a fetish of being softer and being allowed to be vulnerable, and that might include a very dominant man who wants to express himself as a female.
Right.
Does that mean he's gay? No. Does that mean that he's trans or cross-dresser, or any of these things, and that's where people start throwing around terms,
labels.
And labels.
I've had this argument mostly with heterosexual men about how many things are not gay, in my opinion. So just because there are certain acts that are generally attributed to a certain group of people, it doesn't make it. We have these arguments all the time. I'm like, just because you did this one time, or just because this happened, or if it happens in a scenario where there is, say, a heterosexual man dressed up as a woman, and then there's a woman being dominant over him, that does not, in my opinion, make you gay.
No, and I think that is the misunderstanding with BDSM culture in general, or the kink lifestyle, is a lot of it is, this is where you're seeing a lot of alter egos. The thing that you need the most to have that balance in your life, you know, so if you're a softer person, you may have a need to be a dominant in some version of your life in order to play a balanced role in society. And I think that sometimes when you get men and women who have careers or family life that revolves around having to be in control all the time, they're looking for that balance to be vulnerable.
And to be able to turn off. A lot of people just don't have the opportunity to turn off. So when you can't power down, then you don't always power back up the same exact way. And requiring a space that you can do that safely, without judgment, without fear of persecution. I mean, it's 2023 and people are still hiding who they are.
And that's the thing. I think that the bravest thing is people who can say, I acknowledge my alter ego. I'm aware that I have more than one identity, not personality. Identity.
Big difference.
Yes. And own it, and do not cloak or shield themselves from society in order to be accepted. I think one of the most powerful things that you can do is own all of who you are, regardless of how it is perceived by another person or out in the public, you know?
Yeah, you kind of have to. Otherwise, you're ultimately not going to be that happy.
Oh, and you're not going to be balanced.
Not going to be balanced, not going to be happy, you're not going to be steadfast in your own skin. I know personally for me, like Yaz comes from my moniker, Yazlandia, and that started off kind of tongue-in-cheek as me saying, that's the best place to ever be. Yazlandia is the best place to ever be. Until I kind of took that horse and rode it all the way until I've made Yazlandia a better place for people to be in when we're in there. And by better, you know, I mean more fun. And so, Yaz is a derivative of that.
Yeah, and I would definitely say that mathematics is definitely like the more in controlled version of myself. Valina tends to orbit around, unintentionally finds chaos, and that's because the vulnerability allows her to expose parts of herself that are easily taken advantage of. So I find myself in situations that are typically chaotic or self-destructive in some way, and whereas mathematics is in control, is able to hold the room, and whether that's entertainment, workshops, whatever, I'm able to, the room is mine. And I think one of the examples that I was going to use was, you know, when I said that I help other people embrace their alter egos, one of the ways that I do that is providing that safe space for, you know, if I have a client or two that, you know, they want to talk on the phone in their alter ego. So
in character.
So it's a straight heterosexual dominant man who desires to wear women's clothing in order to be softer, more vulnerable, and be able to have that moment with me. I'm just talking as their friend, accepting them in this moment
in a safe space, as
no
a neutral
judgment.
Party.
And I think some of the reality that we are seeing is that even somebody in that situation who's like married and he's got kids, the fear is
not being accepted,
or
being rejected,
or told that there's something wrong with them. And he was expressing that his fear was that his wife would find out that he enjoyed, you know, wearing women's clothing on occasion and being this alter ego.
Right.
And he's like, I'm not gay. I'm not trying to be with other men. It's just, it allows me to decompress and find the more sensitive side of my personality. And I personally think that's really beautiful.
So do I. I think that a lot of people, just because it doesn't relate to them and they automatically, that makes them not understanding of where it's coming from. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair for people to put their spin on someone else's experience that is not harmful to another person. Different story with things, kinks, and fetishes that are harmful to people, but the ones that are not harmful to anyone or that aren't.
And I feel like as long as you're talking about
the fiber of a relationship,
absolutely,
are pretty safe and benign, in my opinion.
And as long as you're talking about two people who are consenting, you're talking about, I accept you as you are safe in this space, and you do not have to hide
who you are.
Personally,
yes, I would not want to be in a relationship with someone who you had to hide every single thing from, or that hid everything from me.
Right. And I think
I tend to be the more accepting person in a lot of scenarios.
And and that's another thing is there's aspects of that dynamic we don't know, other than it could be that they've been married for so long and he maybe shielded himself from this identity for so long that when he decided that he wanted to experiment with this, he doesn't know how do I say I want to do this without it looking. I have a very good example. So I have a friend, and I talk about my in everyday experiences with people, and it went from complaining about not having a very active sex life to me suggesting, well, why don't you just talk to them and have, what is it that you need? What do you want? And then when he expressed wanting to he's a straight man and wanted anal. Her reaction was the opposite of what you should do in that moment. And so she was completely freaked out and was like, oh my God, is he gay? All of these things. And I'm like, so just because, now you made him feel safe and told him that you wanted to know what it was he wanted. He tells you what he wants.
And now you've
thrown down the hammer.
Yeah.
And this is why a lot of people
shamed him.
Yeah, or you retreat and you go back into your I'm just kidding, I don't mean it,
Right.
And sometimes that happens when we're in these really long-term relationships where we have only exposed a certain version of ourselves, and in reality,
the vanilla version,
or the safe version, the part that we know will be accepted,
right?
And then the years go by, and as you get older, I think the thing that we are learning is that it's really hard to survive if you're hiding. If you are hiding
is a facade.
Yes, because
it eventually will fall apart.
Oh yeah, and you'll see that in different parts of your life.
It's impossible to sustain forever.
Oh yeah, and so like you said, it's impossible to sustain forever. Eventually, there will be cracks.
Yep.
And that whether it is in the relationships you have with your immediate people or externally, at some point when you're not fully authentic with yourself, it will come to a head. And that's sometimes where you see it manifest in other ways too. It could be health, it could be
definitely
the relationship falling apart, cheating, things like that. Because if we can't be ourselves within the relationship, what do we do?
Start going to the outside.
Right. So I just, it's how do you say, this is what I am, this is who I am. But if you I feel this way, and I want you to accept me in this moment, and I would love if I could share that with you, you know?
Yeah.
But truth told, we all have alter egos.
We all do. I think the key is to provide safe spaces and to be kind and patient with each other.
Absolutely.
You know?
So we want to know what you think in the comments. We want to know what your alter ego is. Does your alter ego have a name?
Yeah.
What does it look like?
How does that whole picture present itself? Let us know. We're curious.
We would like to remind you to like, share, and subscribe, and comments, very necessary. And we appreciate your time listening to us every time. So be kind to each other.
All right. Take care.
Bye.